Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again. I am really excited for this one as we go back to November of 2001 as we cover Angra's fourth studio release, Rebirth. But before we talk all things Angra, how are you, my friend?
I'm great. I feel like I was listening to this this album for like the first time in a really long time. I don't even know when the last time I sat down and played it from start to finish was, and it was interesting to kind of re-experience the experience I had back when I was in college when this album came out initially, and it was such a there was I remember a lot of trepidatious excitement being first new Angra album in 3 years, but with a restructured lineup, so there was a little bit of nerves. Is this going to be how's this going to sound? And we had a little bit of a taste of it with Acid Rain that got released a little bit ahead of the album, but I kind of, as I mentioned last week, strayed a bit from the usual doing an album on its anniversary, just because I feel like the announcement of the reformation of this lineup, it just seemed more timely. So, and then that means we can get to Temple of Shadows all the sooner as we make our way through the discography. But all is good here. I'm looking forward to having this discussion. This is an album that's been in my list of albums I wanted to talk about for a while. I was just kind of waiting for the right time. I think I was at one point pretty much relegated to waiting until its anniversary, but this came with a good reason. So here we are. It's the end of 2025. This lineup is back together. So let's talk about Rebirth today.
Yeah, good choice. Certainly a fitting time. And I just want to mention one or two things before we get there. Spent most of my time going back to my top 50 list and some of the honorable mentions, and I'm kind of listening to them in reverse order, hoping that each album gets a little bit better than the next, and then therefore I know that my order is correct, although splitting hairs, I admit. But I'm enjoying that process, and I hope to make it through the entire top 50 again, although there's certain albums that I'm very familiar with at this point. But that's the goal. But a couple of new items, or new items to me anyway, that I wanted to just mention. The first is a band out of Finland, which I found really interesting. They're called Suotana. They came out with an album called Onus 2. Couldn't tell you what it means, but what I can tell you is it's 7 tracks, the last of which is a Children of Bodom cover. The first 6 of which are their own material, and it sounds like the power metal you would love, but with dueling black and death vocals, which I found to be really, really good and really interesting. If this had come out earlier in the year, I think it would have been something that really resonated with you, just because I know that is that kind of power metal style that you can particularly enjoy. I don't want to say in spite of, but with those extreme vocals. So I'll post a track this week. I encourage you and everyone else to give it a listen. And in a completely different vein, a new EP came out by the Chechnyan band Symphonity. It's called Beyond Olympus. It's really a several live tracks, but the one, I guess, new song, if you will, or at least it was new to me, is called Out and About. I thought it was a really cool tune, and as I mentioned, there's 5 or 6 live tracks that follow it. Just a nice song from them. I'll post that song this week as well. So a lot of power metal, I guess, on my end, different vocal styles. And then, of course, this Angra album, which, needless to say, was an experience. I knew this album very, very well. I played this thing to death when it came out, and I believe the release date was November 13th, 2001. I would argue that this band needed to hit a home run with this release. I liked Fireworks. I thought it was a really good album, but it was different than Angels Cry and Holy Land. 3 guys in the lineup leave. In are the 3 new members, and we'll go through the lineup momentarily. But not every band hits a home run when there's lineup changes. Iron Maiden did not hit a home run with Blaze Bayley. They needed a comeback album, and they really didn't with Blaze. Some people hate it. Some people like it to varying degrees. But I wouldn't say it's a home run. Angra needed a home run with this just the same, but I think they got much closer to it than Iron Maiden did. Would you agree with that statement that they needed a home run here?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything else. Like when there's that much of a shift, you have to come out of the gate swinging hard. And you know, whether it was, you know, Nightwish with Dark Passion Play or you know, like you mentioned, like, you know, Iron Maiden with their changes, or Halloween with Master of the Rings. There's so many, you know, examples of these types of situations. And I think that as far as Angra goes, I think this was pretty much the best case scenario, all things considered. And when you talk about and then the Shaman debut album Ritual that would follow the next year, it seemed like we were kind of blessed with a situation similar to like when Roland and Uli left Halloween and we were left with 2 really good power metal bands instead of 1. And that I just remember like just being like, wow, like they split up and both segments of Angra came out with an incredible album, like, you know, one being a debut and one being a new lineups debut. And so like it was almost like an embarrassment of riches in a lot of ways, where instead of like there being a disappointing, you know, album following a lineup change, you ended up with like 2 really good albums by the split lineups. I guess like the most recent thing I can think of is there's an Italian power metal band. There was one, Calidia, that they had broken up a couple of years ago, and like half the members like went on and created a band called Zenorous, and the other half went on to create a band that we got to see at Prague Power last year, Alterium. So, and both albums were really good. So like, it's a little bit on the smaller scale compared to Angra and what we were, especially at a time where like we were fairly new fans of the band at that point. Like we had only been listening to the band for 4 or 5 years, I guess, at that point.
Although
so
they
like,
hadn't been around for that long by that point either. I mean,
no, not at all.
Angels Cry had come out 8 years prior.
Right. So like the bands, it's interesting. Like back then when you look at it, like it seemed like a really long time. It seemed like Andre Matos was like in Angra for 20 years, but like, you know, that's just, you know, it felt like how like Kisk was in Halloween for, you know, 20 years, and it was really like 6, you know, like it's just funny. Like when you look at time, like I'm pretty sure Edu spent more time in Angra than Matos did at the end of the day, or if not, it was a comparable amount. At this point, maybe even Fabio has spent as many years with Angra as Matos or Edu did. There's almost like these like a 3-pronged era of Angra, and now the band is kind of, at least for now, going back to the second era before, you know, they move on to whatever it is they are going to move on to next. It looks to me like, other than Fabio Leone, the rest of the band is sticking around, and the band will carry on, no pun intended. I wonder where this leaves Kiko as a guy who's no longer with Megadeth, and I guess might have some free time again. But a long-winded response to your simple question.
Well, I'm going to ask you another question before we get into this. I think there's often a split between the Angels Cry crowd and the Holy Land crowd. It's something we talked about when we covered Holy Land and even Angels Cry way back in episode 5. I think there's a similar split between the Rebirth crowd and the Temple of Shadows crowd. Prior to listening to this week, were you in one of those two camps in terms of, did you in your mind have a preference between the first two Edu albums? And without telling us what it is, did it change this week? Now, I'm not saying that you listened to Temple, but did your opinion change going into the week and then where we are now?
No, it didn't, but that's only because I just don't really know Temple of Shadows that well. And the reason for that is really just because it came out while I was, I think it was like after I graduated from college. So like I was really, for the next like I don't know, 5 years, I was kind of not as into metal as I probably, or no, like I'm being wishy-washy. I was not into metal as much as I was before or would become again. So when this album came out, it's the last Angra album I bought on CD. I still have it, but I'm really excited to discuss it when we get to it because it's really going to be like my first time really listening to it a lot. Like, I'm looking at just all these guest stars that were on it and everything, and I'm excited. There's songs like Angels and Demons and Spread Your Fire that I absolutely know really well, and mostly because the band has continued to play those songs live through the years. But this is one of those albums I have to really go back and listen to again before I can really make a decision as to which of the two albums I like more. But I will say, I just as a little, I was going to say foreplay. That's not the word I was looking for.
That's a different podcast, my friend.
Yeah, that's something else. For warning, I don't know. It's been a long day. I didn't like Rebirth as much as I remembered it.
Really? Okay.
And no joke, there was one song I didn't even really remember, which is crazy because I remembered every other song super well, and then there was this one other song where I'm like, why don't I remember this? And then, as I said last week, that I wanted to talk about the EP that followed. There were some songs on that EP that I thought were better than some of the songs on Rebirth that I think could have been on this album. So it's interesting. Like it's going to be fun talking about this because this is one of those instances where as I still enjoyed it, don't get me wrong, but I just, I don't know if I will, I have to go back and look at what I ranked the first three albums, but I don't know if I would rank this ahead of definitely the first two.
I can understand not ranking it ahead of the first two, but I think we may have real difference of opinions on some of these tracks, especially on the EP. This album I was always a Rebirth guy. I think it's better than Temple of Shadows, although admittedly I haven't listened to that in a while. But I didn't lose any love for this album listening to it. It was like a warm blanket on a cold day, or chicken soup. I just love this album. So I think our scores may be quite different here. Maybe one of the first times that I rank a power metal album higher than you, which I don't know if that's ever happened. So that is something to look at. Just to kind of set the stage here, Kiko Loureiro and Rafael Bittencourt are the dynamic guitar duo. Everybody else is new. It's Edo Falaschi on vocals. It's Felipe Andreoli on bass and Achilles Priester on drums. And as I can't help myself every time I mention Achilles Priester, watch his Dream Theater audition if you want to laugh. I mean, it's not something I would ever do, but it's funny because he's getting so frustrated because he can't play whatever it was, the Dance of Eternity or whatever. So anyway, I digress. Arguably the second generation of Angra, but just as classic a lineup for many people, just kind of phase two for the band. And so, as I mentioned, came out November 13th, 2001. Everything is, it's going to be interesting because I have thoughts on the EP as well but we'll get there shortly.
It's kind of crazy when you look back on it that there's only one member of the band who's been a constant presence.
Yeah,
from
but
day
arguably
one.
the most important member.
Yeah, I mean, I know that at one point, like, looking back on these albums, I thought it was interesting that, like, Andre wrote a lot of songs for Angra when he was in the band. Edu, even on his very first album, has some songwriting credits. So, like, these guys came in and it wasn't like they were just hired to sing and not ask questions. Like, even though Raphael and Kiko were kind of the engine of the band, so to speak, like, they definitely let the other members of the band get involved in the songwriting, which is cool. So I don't know if Fabio ever got involved in the songwriting in his time. But I mean, I know there's people that are big fans of that era of Angra. Like, I feel like, I don't know, to me, like, you can't really go wrong. I love all three eras for different reasons. I think I'll always be partial to those first two albums just because of both the quality of the albums, the love of Andre Matos, and just the nostalgia of them being the only two albums that Angra had at the time that we became fans of the band. But I was surprised at how much I enjoyed Fireworks when we went back and talked about it. So, like, I'm not saying that I'm going to rank this album ahead of Fireworks. We'll see. But it's definitely, like, not, I don't think a serious drop off from Holy Land and Angels Cry at all, which is as much of a compliment as you can give this album.
I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. I'm curious to see the scores at the end. One last anecdote before we start. Edu Falashi for many was a complete unknown for many. I actually have those two albums he recorded with Symbols, their self-titled album in 1998 and Call to the End, which came out in 2000. But at the time, I don't think I put two and two together, and I may not have even had the albums when this came out. I don't remember hearing Edu's vocals prior to the single from this album. Had you ever heard the name, or was this a complete, like, brand new for you?
No, I had no idea who he was. I didn't know who anybody was that was joining the band at this time. Nor did I know anybody that joined Andre Matos and Luis Mariucci and whoever else was in Shaman at the time. I just wasn't that plugged into, the metal scene or Brazilian, metal vocalists or anything like that. So, but I mean, it could have been anybody, like, and I probably wouldn't have known who it was, in all honesty. So, like, at that time, I just remember going into it with an open mind and thinking to myself, like, well, they made 3 really good albums before and there's still 2 guys left. So, let's see what happens. I mean, I don't think anybody could have expected this album to be as good as it turned out to be when you have that big of a it's really like an exodus, like 3 guys, 3 longtime members of the band, long time in terms of the existence of the band, packing up and going elsewhere. I felt like they, in a weird way, both bands managed to keep, I think, the soul of Angra intact, but in their own way.
Yeah.
Like because the 2 albums are very different. I feel like the Shaman album almost hones the Holy Land, the more folky kind of vibe, a little bit more than Rebirth did. But I also think that Rebirth took more of the power metal forward vibe Angels Cry had, and less of the, I think, a little bit of the more mid-tempo styles that we saw on Fireworks. So, like, it's an interesting, just interesting how, like, these 2, it's weird to me that, like, they had such if they did have such musical differences, because the albums are not super far apart. Like, then, you know, as far as like the sound goes, like it's not samey, like, but it's also like, it's not like one band became a melodic death metal band and the other one was like, yeah, let's do, you know, ambient folk. Like,
I'd be there for it with these musicians, but I
sure, why not? But you know, I have to think it was more of like a personality clash than anything else.
I would imagine. Let's get into it. I'm excited. This album kicks off with an intro track called In Excelsis, and I should note, you know, we don't pay much mind generally to intro tracks, but this classical intro does such a great job of leading up to Nova Era, the first real track, that I would argue it's amongst the best of its kind in terms of a true intro track. It just feels like something new and immensely big is about to happen, and it also makes for a great intro to a live show. So before we even get into Nova Era, what did you think of this intro when you put the album on for the first time and you hear that slow classical build?
I think it's still one of the most iconic intros to an album of all time. And what makes it, like, I love, like, the whole package of In Excelsis and Nova Era as, you know, this one beast of an intro. Nova Era meaning like new era, quite literally what is happening here, rebirth. Like, it's, they're not being subtle about, you know, this is a new time for the band. And what a better way to just, first you have this fantastic, just classical piece that, builds and builds and builds until Nova Era kicks in and kicks ass, and we're off and running. There was no other choice for the first song on this album. This was an absolutely perfect way to kick things off, not just on this album, but this whole new era of Angra, for lack of a better term. You know, we got these are the new members. This is what the new singer sounds like. Here's what we sound like. I was pleasantly surprised at how good the production was on this album after all these years. Shout out to Dennis Ward. Just, it sounds so, I mean, I'm still listening to my original disc that I ripped to iTunes, you know, like, it's not like a remastered or remixed version. It sounds phenomenal. And I think we had kind of made mention that I don't remember, you know, like Angel's Cry, I think was not sonically, production wise, the greatest thing in the world. I still gave it a 10. I still think it's as perfect of a power metal album as there ever was. This, I think, is the best production up to this point of Angra I've heard.
And it's ironic because there's albums that would come later in the discography that don't sound as good as this.
Are you thinking about the live album?
No, I wasn't even going there. I just meant in terms of, like, I guess it's, I'll tell you in a second, but the reality is, like, this did sound great. Again, to your point, shout out to Dennis Ward. But I think that Aurora, Consurgence, and even like Aqua sounded kind of like, I'm not a fan of the sound of those two albums.
Legit forgot about that album.
I don't think you're missing anything. It kind of sucked, but like, whatever. It was the end of
We'll
that
cover
era.
it in, I don't know, 2031 probably.
Mark your calendars, folks. We're in for a treat. I would argue, I was wondering if you were going to pick Nova Era for your song of the week. It is one of the best power metal songs I've ever heard. The orchestration is great. It's extremely heavy and fast, but it oozes melody. And honestly, it could have been on either one of the first two albums. And I think the verses are really strong, and Edu does such a good job on this track. But the chorus is absolutely infectious and maybe one of the best in their entire discography. In many ways, it reminds me a lot of Carry On, both in terms of the structure, the melody, etc., even though it doesn't sound like Carry On. It just reminds me of that. And then at the end, he talks about bringing the angels back to life, which I think is really a nod to the Angels Cry era of the band. A++ song, one of the best I've ever heard. Not my song of the week. It would have been too easy, but I love this tune. And then they go into Millennium Sun, which has the unenviable task of being sandwiched between two classic power metal tunes. But it's up to the task. The pianos and the vocals at the start, oddly enough, do remind me of the stuff that was on the Shaman album, that first Shaman album. Shout out to Gunter Werno from Vandenplas, who does the piano on this album. He does a phenomenal job, and that was one of the biggest things that they had to do when they replaced Andre Matos, because he would play piano on the first three albums. So they had to go get someone who was worth their salt, and they did with Gunter Werno. But in addition to reminding me a lot of Shaman, when the band joins in Millennium Sun, the song really picks up. And I think it's highlights a lot of the band's diversity because it's quite progressive in many ways. Great verses, great backing vocals, which is kind of a nod to the Holy Land era. Just a great song on the front half of the album.
I remember when this album came out that I really, really liked the song a lot, and that has not changed at all. I think it's an outstanding second track. I like that it starts out kind of unassumingly, like you're almost going to get a ballad, and then it just kind of builds to this like really outstanding track. Love, like you said, love the backing vocals. I think it adds such a nice layer to the song. Just a really great way to follow an all-time classic. This is one of my favorite albums, one of my favorite songs on the album, I would say. Really still holds up, and there's a really excellent acoustic version on the EP that we'll discuss towards the end. But outstanding song. There's a lot of songs on here that could have been song of the week, but I kind of made my choice pretty early on in the week. But yeah, we'll get there. Looking forward to seeing what yours is as well.
Did you remember when Acid Rain came out as a single before the album?
I do, because when I hear the intro to that song, that like almost operatic vocals, I don't even know if that is Edu or not at the beginning, but I just remember like it was definitely like one of those just MP3s that were floating around the internet back then. I was in college, so it was probably like I probably got it on Napster or something, or somebody emailed it to me or something. I just remember it floating around. I do not remember if there was a actual like CD single. I don't remember ever seeing it. I definitely didn't own it. But I just remember hearing it for the first time and being like, all right, you know what? This new version of Angra is probably going to be okay. I think we're going to be all right.
Yeah. This is, I don't know that I would have selected it as the first single, but it probably would have been my second choice. I will admit, of all the songs on the album, I think you could argue this one has lost its luster just a touch. It's a little bit overplayed for me even to this day, and they still play it live, and that's great, but like, I don't know, there's better songs on the album. I appreciate the orchestration and the Latin chants, and it's not blazingly fast, but it is catchy. And it almost sounds like Edu struggled with that first note. And so I don't know if they like kind of shot for the moon and they landed a little bit less than that. Some of the samples are really, really cool, especially the tribal beats and the keyboards and stuff like that. I love the instrumental section, but I think that at some point this was probably a 10 for me as a song, and now it's probably like an 8.5. It just lost a little something over time.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I don't remember loving it in the grand scheme of the album when it came out. I remember there, like, especially sandwiched between Millennium Sun and Heroes of Sand, which were two of my favorites on the album. But I think that whereas the two songs that are on either side of it are a little bit more on a mid-tempo kind of pace, although Millennium Sun does pick up a little bit of energy towards the end. I think Acid Rain is more of just a kind of straightforward power metal song, and that's probably why they chose it as kind of a preview of what was to come. I think it was like a smart call, not to like show your hand too much right away, but just to give a taste of what's to come. Or maybe, Raphael was just like, let's make it one of my songs, whatever. Like, but, it's a solid tune, but I just think that it, stuck between two, like, of my favorite Angra songs. It's kind of in an unenviable position, I feel. So that's kind of, where I'm at.
So for my money, the middle piece of this album, or the stretch starting with Heroes, moving on to the title track, and then ultimately going into Judgment Day, is one of the most unheralded 3 tracks in the entire discography, and they're all lumped together. I love the middle section of this album, and it starts with Heroes, which not only is great in its original version, but is great acoustically as well. But this particular version on the album starts with the acoustic guitar and the beautiful vocals behind it. And it almost gives the listener that feeling like it's going to be a ballad, but it couldn't be any further from that, because it really picks up into this mid-paced banger, very melodic, almost whimsical. And I love the chorus on this song. It kind of makes you sway back and forth, almost like a dance type of thing. Phenomenal, catchy, and the bridge is great. Not just the vocals, but the guitar work. A complete earworm, and was nearly my song of the week, and for a while it was. And let me shoehorn this in here. I don't know that I've had as much difficulty as I did this week with picking a song of the week, because there was about 5 or 6 songs that all jumped out. And I think at one time they've all been my favorite tracks on the album. And so because I oscillate between tracks, I really wasn't sure what to choose. I'm still not sure, but I'm going to pass on Heroes just for now.
Yeah. I'm starting to have these like flashbacks to seeing the band at Prague Power 3, and here they played, a significant portion of this album, including this song. And I was very excited to hear them play this along with Millennium Sun and Acid Rain and Nova Era, and they pretty much played like the first however many, I think everything up to Rebirth pretty much on this album. This has always been one of my favorites. I remember like getting the album and hearing the song and being like, yeah, this is a good song. And I never knew that Edu wrote the song. So hell of a first, solo, composition for our friend Edu. Really lovely song. And, I have to say, I'm starting to feel kind of jealous of anybody who's going to get to see the reunion lineup. I don't know how Edu's voice has held up over the years, 'cause this stuff is,
not the easiest to sing.
No, it's not like the stuff that he did with his other band, whose name is escaping me right now. Yeah, Alma, which I think that he kind of kept it a little bit more reasonable. We'll see. I mean, there's not really too many people who would be able to handle, I think, some of these notes. But this is a great song. Definitely another song of the week contender of many on this one.
So I agree, obviously. And we get to Unholy Wars. And what I love about this track is that it has that real tribal sound, that it almost is a callback to Holy Land. That start, though, specifically reminds me a lot of Fireworks. Like, this is a song that was almost recorded during that era, or so I feel. I mean, I'm not saying that for sure, but this is a song that both Kiko and Raphael wrote together, and it's the longest song on the album, I have to believe. It's just under 8 minutes and 15 seconds. I also love this song live because they'll bring out additional drums and they'll all play the drums together. I thought that was a really nice touch. And then about a minute and a half in, after this lengthy intro, you get to that classic guitar Angra work with just the song taking off like a rocket ship. There's even a really cool bass solo on this track. And what I love, I think, most of all is that, especially towards the end, I get Carolina the Fourth vibes, which You don't have to ask me twice. I am a huge fan of that song and whatnot. I don't know that it's my favorite song on the album, but I think it doesn't have the miles that some of the other songs do. So the hell with it. I'm going to make this my song of the week. Let's give it a listen, and then I want to hear your thoughts. Talk to me about Unholy Wars. Am I overhyping this song, or is it like just completely underappreciated?
I feel like I didn't appreciate it as much as I should have when the album first came out, and now like in the later years, I don't know if it's because they've broken it out live or whatever, but literally before we talked about this, in my head, I had said, it sounds like the song Holy Land, but then it turns into Carolina the Fourth.
Yes.
Like, and so it kind of takes some of that best stuff from that Holy Land album and it's kind of like a new age version of it with Edu and the other new members of the band. Outstanding, really outstanding song. Like, really all the things that make Angra great are all on display in this 8+ minute tune. Edu sounds fantastic. The instrumentation's great. It kind of, for a long song, has different parts to it. So I feel like you're not listening to just an 8-minute repeat, like, song that's very repetitive. So I say, do we, from now on, call Kiko's time with Megadeth the Holy Wars era, and his time with Angra the Unholy Wars era?
I see what you did there. I like it. I like it a lot. I'm glad it's not just me. I love this tune. And then as we move ahead, another just phenomenal track with Rebirth, the title track. Give me your thoughts on this one.
When the acoustic guitar starts playing at the beginning of the song, goosebumps every single time. There's a video that I saw online years ago. I'm sure it's still on YouTube somewhere, of the band playing the song acoustic. I guess there really is only an acoustic version of the song. It's an acoustic song, with Fabio doing the vocals in an acoustic setting, and he sounds so good. Like, I feel like he will always, I don't know if he'll ever get the respect or the love he deserves for kind of holding it together for this band for as long as he did, as like a guy who I think they just took with them on 70,000 Tons because they needed a singer, and he ended up being in the band for a decade. But sidebar notwithstanding, this is just another outstanding Angra ballad. I love this song. It's great.
When I love the acoustic guitar at the start, but when the vocals come in, it is like chill-inducing. You're almost just dying to hear where they're going to go with it. And it has a really interesting cadence. Almost, I had used the word dance-like earlier. This is like a waltz. Like, I can actually see like the movement to the way this song is constructed. And then it builds to this crescendo. I love it. I think the flute-like effects also add to the song. And to your point, I always loved Fabio's version of this song. I think he does a phenomenal. I'm not the biggest fan of Fabio's time with Angra, but I thought he knocked this song out of the park completely. So hearing different versions with different singers, and when they do it with Netta, down the line, I'm sure that'll be great too.
Yeah, and I just love that it goes right back to that acoustic guitar riff at the end. It just it's like just a really nice book-ended song. And it does, I didn't really think about it at first because I've heard the acoustic version so many times, but yeah, there is some good electric guitar solos on this song too. It's not just an acoustic song, as I incorrectly pointed out earlier.
But not your song of the week.
Nope, we're still getting there.
Well, is it Judgment Day, the next track?
Judgment Day is where I think the album starts to lose me for the first time.
I agree with you.
I don't know if it's because they spell Judgment Day with 2 E's, and it upsets me because I'm always a 1 E judgment kind of guy. But I swear to God, I as many times as I've heard this song over the years, I swear to God, every time I put it on, I feel like I'm hearing it for the first time. There's nothing memorable about it to me, and I don't know why. This track where I feel like they could have put something from the EP, particularly Hunters and Prey, probably my favorite song.
That is the best song
on that
the
EP.
That might have been
I don't know if it was even existed at this point, but I don't love this song. I'll just say that.
I love the drum intro. It is a kind of a forgotten track. It's really proggy. I think the drums and the bass both stand out, and I think the mix is phenomenal. The verses are pretty good. The chorus is really catchy. I think that Gunther Werner's piano and keys are kind of a driving force, and I like the guitar solo. But I agree with you in that it's not as good as the rest of the songs. For my money, it's like a half step below. Not a bad song. I like it more than you do, but I acknowledge that everything that preceded it was better.
Yeah, and everything that follows, I think, as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because the next track, Running Alone, is low-key another Song of the Week candidate, and I'm tempted to think it's probably yours.
It isn't.
It isn't?
Nope.
Really? All right.
Yep.
This Running Alone reminds me so much of Angel's Cry and the material that was on that album. It's very
the beginning of the song is a page right out of the song Evil Warning.
Yes, 100%. And that's like I think of the end of Angel's Cry as that album comes to a close. Very symphonic, very catchy, and it's really a fast-paced banger that's kind of intricately constructed and woven together. Excellent verses, really catchy chorus, and the instrumental section is a power metal clinic in how to write an instrumental section of a power metal tune. This is a song that really puts on full display what makes Angra special. I would only argue that it might have been, or arguably could have been, the last track. Like it would have been a good way to go out with this song, but they didn't. They went in a different direction. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Running Alone.
I think this is another really good song. Again, one of those songs that I think I didn't appreciate as much when the album first came out. I think it was just because those first 5 songs really kind of blew my socks off. And so like the rest of the album, it was almost kind of like an afterthought when I was younger. And now that I've been able to kind of go back and re-listen to it, even now, it's like literally now, as we're sitting here talking, I'm like, yeah, this is better than I remember it when I listened to it 3 hours ago. So like,
that's a good sign, I guess.
Yeah. So, another longer track, but just has a lot of elements that, we love about Angra. And I will just say though, I disagree. Like that Visions Prelude is, to me, like the way that Lasting Child was the perfect way to end Angel's Cry. This was the perfect way to end Rebirth. It's a little bit unassuming because it's more or less a ballad. It's adapted from Chopin's Opus 28, number 20 in C minor for you classical fans out there. But, at the time I didn't know what the hell that was, so I just assumed it was an Angra song. This is a song that in later years has become one of my all-time favorite Angra songs. And I just think it's so beautifully composed. It's so beautifully sung by Edu. There's so much emotion. It just drips with emotion, and it just keeps building and building to the end. And then there's a really I think, dramatic key change at the end. I love this song, and I think that it just ends this outstanding album in such a wonderful, heartfelt way. It starts out, the album starts out just phenomenal, and it ends phenomenal. It's really one of the most well book-ended albums maybe since Angels Cry. I mean, I think there's a lot of parallels to that album on this album here, as we've discussed. But I mean, the same way that emotional lasting child, which I dare say it was a long time ago we did that episode, but I'm fairly certain that was my song of the week back then. I'm going to follow suit with Vision's Prelude. So let's give it a listen. And I look forward to your thoughts on this outro. I guess it's an outro track. 4.5 minute outro, I guess. So here it is.
I am absolutely shocked that you chose this as your song of the week. If you would have given me 8 guesses, I don't know that I would have picked it for the end. Not that it's not a bad song for me. I just thought with all these power metal classics, you were going to go with your bread and butter. I'm glad you went something different. To me, I think that Running Alone is so good that this almost feels like a bit of a letdown. Not a bad track, just anticlimactic in comparison. And so that is the reason why I say it's a little bit extra. I almost wonder if it would have been better if you flipped them, but I think that would have been weird too. So I wouldn't advocate for that. I think in many ways it's an Edu vocal solo. Yeah, the band is there, but it really is that emotion that you mentioned, which is just stellar. It's just absolutely an emotional vocal approach for sure.
There's some nice piano work, I think, on this track as well. Oh yeah,
but the vocals are what steal the show as far as I'm concerned. I'm looking forward to talking about Hunters and Prey, which came out about 6 or 7 months later. I have thoughts as to how that came about, but what are you going to rate this album proper as you come to a close with Rebirth itself?
I think that I have to give this one a 9. It's just an all-time classic. I just don't think that it competes with those first two for me. Like Angels Cry, like I said, is always going to be a 10 for me. And I haven't given an album a 10 in a long time. That was, I think, the first 10 I've ever given on the podcast. I gave Holy Land a 9.75, which not too far behind. And I gave Fireworks an 8.375, which I think, because it was a little bit of a drop off from those first two. This, I feel like we're climbing back up the mountain again. It's not in the same breath for me as those first two. I think that if you swapped Judgment Day with, say, Hunters and Prey, we might be talking about a 9.5, or it might have jumped up a little bit. But it's a hell of an album. I may even be rating it a little bit low. But yeah, I feel pretty good about just going with a 9. How about you?
I had both those first two albums at 9.5, and as I look at that, it seems low to me. I'm not sure why I did that. I'm gonna have to question my judgment there, no pun intended. But I will say that this is a tad below those two. It's a 9 for me as well. So I guess we came to the same conclusion at the end of the day. It's a 9.
How many points did you knock off for the spelling of judgment?
3. And then it built itself back because some of these tracks are so good. But no, kidding aside, phenomenal album, and it holds up well. And some of my favorite tracks now were not my favorite tracks 25 years ago, but really good. What I find interesting is that Hunters and Prey comes out June 24th, 2002. So really 7 months after this album. And just because of the way it's produced and the way it sounds, I almost wonder if it's a collection of B-sides that they put together because they were in the studio, had recorded them, and then decided to release it. Because sonically, it sounds nearly identical to the album itself. And although there's some really good material on here, I'm not sure that I would swap any of it out for the way that Rebirth is presented. And although it's not a 10, I just think it flows fairly well, but for the last track, like I mentioned. So let's talk about it in longer form. It starts with a song called Live and Learn. Really great guitar intro. It kind of picks up right where the album left off. But I think that for a banger, it's a little bit less than all the other songs that have a similar cadence on Rebirth. It really feels like a B-side, and the verses are a little bland, although I think everything else is quite solid. I always thought this EP was very good, but I never thought it was great.
No, and I don't think that was really the point. This was actually this and Eyes of Christ were both songs that were written during Holy Land and were demoed on. There's an Eyes of Christ demo that's out there, and so these were re-recorded with the current lineup. So I think that it definitely gave a nice fresh coat of paint on songs that were literally recorded as demos initially.
Yes.
I don't know about Bleeding Heart and Hunters and Prey. Those might be new songs, but Live and Learn and Eyes of Christ for sure are older Angra songs that were repurposed for this album. I think Live and Learn is a solid tune. I don't know that I would swap it onto Rebirth, but I think it's a solid tune, and I wouldn't be sad if I heard the band play it live.
Yeah, I think it's a good tune. I think it's just, I don't know, not as good as the other material on the album. Bleeding Heart is a beautiful ballad, one of the top songs on the EP as far as I'm concerned. Not the best in their catalog, but a solid song that is actually a real earworm.
I almost feel bad for this song that it's kind of relegated to this EP because it's a really nice ballad. It's again showcasing Iju's outstanding vocals. Really nice tune. It's kind of a fun thing with an EP. Like, I don't know that you'd put a power ballad like this as the second track on a full length album, but on an EP you can just pretty much do whatever the hell you want. And so I forgot how good this song is. It's a really catchy tune. I don't know that it would have fit on Rebirth, thematically, but I think it's a really nice song. And if you're an Angra fan and you're not familiar with the song, you should definitely go out of your way to check it out because I think it's a really nice tune.
Yeah, I agreed. I think the title track for the EP is probably the best song on the album. It has that real ethnic vibe to it, surprisingly good live. And almost reminds me of a lot of the stuff that the band would write in later years, even with Fabio. It was almost ahead of its time in that regard. But by the same token, I could have seen it on Fireworks. So I guess I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. But the strings are kind of subtle and effective. Love the percussion. And I don't know that I used to have an affinity for the song, but I think as I've gotten older, I've actually grown to like it more and more.
I love this song. I don't think I was subtle about it leading up to this, but I'm a big fan of this song. I think it's great. I love that the band still plays it live, even though it's kind of an EP tune. But I really like this song and would not have been sad if it was swapped out with Judgment Day, as I mentioned earlier. I just think it's a stronger track. It's catchier, more of an earworm. I think this is definitely the highlight of the EP for me.
So when you mentioned the aforementioned Eyes of Christ, have you ever heard the demo?
I remember Mike showing me the demo of this song. I don't know where the hell he got it from. Probably you. Like I had heard the recording with Matos back when. I don't know that I remembered it all that well, but when this came out, I was like, oh yeah, that's that song that Mike had shown me, and I think I've since gotten a copy of that Eyes of Christ demo. I haven't gone back and listened to it in probably, I don't know, a few years. So it'd be interesting to go back and listen to it. But I think this is it's an okay song. It's probably my least favorite of the 4 new tracks. But it's solid. But I could see why it remained on an EP and not on a full length album.
Yeah, it definitely gives the Holy Land vibes, and I guess it makes sense because of when it was originally recorded as a demo. The trumpets especially just scream Holy Land to me. It's kind of a mid-pace rocker, less power metal and more like folky, I guess, at least until it gets going. Solid guitar solo, better than I remember it, to be honest, but I don't think it's a standout track. And then you get to these pair of acoustic songs, which Rebirth is almost made for an acoustic version, and I think it's a really good cover. And then Heroes of Sand as an acoustic song, also exceptionally well done.
Yeah, I misspoke earlier when I said there was an acoustic version of Millennium Sun on here.
I know what you meant.
There should have been.
There you go. Yeah.
But I feel like that song would do well in an acoustic setting, and I could have sworn I've heard it acoustic at some point, so I'll have to dig into that. But yeah, Rebirth and Heroes of Sand are both 2 songs that, because the actual original version start out as an acoustic song to begin with, it kind of makes sense to do an acoustic version where it's just an acoustic song. But they both fit really nicely, and these are nice, bonuses to getting this EP. Were you familiar with this Genesis song, Mama?
So I was thinking about how to kind of convey this story to you, but this was interesting. When the EP came out, I was not at all familiar with the song, and I haven't listened to the EP in probably 20 years. So I couldn't even begin to tell you the last time I heard it. And since then, I've seen Genesis in concert. I've listened to a lot of their catalog, and so I became very familiar with the song. And when I was looking at the EP, and I was playing it for the first time this week, and I heard the song, I'm like, oh my God, this was a cover? I didn't realize it when I heard it like the first time. So I'm familiar with it now, but I'm today years old when I figured it out. So, yeah, interesting cover. Not my favorite Genesis tune, but quite a popular Genesis song, I think, in the pantheon of their stuff. Well done for what it is. It was just never my favorite Genesis song.
I need to go back and listen to the original just to see if, like, the elements that make it sound like Angra are Angra doing that, or if it actually was a song that, like, Angra listened to and was like, oh, this is kind of like what we're doing, let's do a cover of it, because it is a very folky kind of vibe. I never really thought much of cover. Yeah, I never really thought much of the song. I think they do a nice job with it. I am a little bit more partial to their cover of the Police's Synchronicity Part 1 that they did much later on with Fabio on, I believe, which album was that on? That was Secret Garden. I just love that version. It's one of my all-time favorite songs, so I was happy to see Angra do a cover of it. But they wrap up the EP with a nice foreign language version of Hunters and Prey in Portuguese. Done in Portuguese. I believe the pronunciation is Caça e Caçador, I believe is the correct pronunciation. Milton had taught me that C with the little thing on the bottom is pronounced like an S. So it's a little Portuguese lesson from Milton Mendonça. So, basically the exact same song, just sung in Portuguese, but
but a cool EP that I was happy to get at the time. And I haven't listened to it much, but it was nice to revisit it. I again say that the album is better, but it's cool to have. And the Angra completionist in me was thrilled, obviously, to get my hands on this.
Do you have any brief comments on the Live in Sao Paulo Rebirth World Tour album / DVD that was released the year after the Hunters and Prey EP?
Sit back, relax, and grab a beverage. Having seen this lineup at Prague Power and then seeing them in New York City at L'Amour's in front of like a surprisingly large crowd for 2002 or whatever it was. It was that stage in my life where I would get my hands on every single thing I could from certain bands, and this was no different. But as far as my money goes, I felt like I got completely ripped off by the audio version of this. I haven't listened to it probably since the month that I got it. And I remember going back to it one or two times and being like, I just can't listen to this. It just sounded so poor. The effort was there, but not really. I don't like this live recording at all. And it's something I joke about to this day. I don't know what they were thinking. They could have done so much more and they didn't.
The set list is very similar to what we heard in Atlanta at Prague Power 3, with couple extra tunes sprinkled in, but my funny story about the DVD is that I owned it and didn't know that I had it. It came with my copy of Temple of Shadows as a bonus DVD, and I just either never noticed or just forgot. And then years later was like looking through for whatever reason my CDs and was like, oh, there's a DVD in here, and I popped it in. And I remember actually telling you, it sounds slightly better if you listen to it in 5.1 versus stereo. I don't know that it saves it, but yeah, I just remember you always had a distaste for the recording, and so I felt like I would have been remiss to not bring it up.
Well, I think that puts a bow on this album and the EP and whatnot. But good choice. I'm glad you picked it. I just want to briefly mention several tours that are coming through. Just to kind of give some news, Sebastian Bach has announced a North American tour. He's going out from February 26th well into April. He's hitting many, many markets throughout the United States. Amon Amarth has announced a tour with Death Clock, also for 2026, starting in April the 15th to be exact, in Phoenix, Arizona. They're doing a run of shows. They end in Las Vegas on the 21st. Cradle of Filth is going out on tour with Suffocation in late April and May. Avenged Sevenfold is going out on tour. They're playing some really large venues, including the Bell Center in Montreal and other places. And finally, Creator going back out on tour with Carcass in May. So just a run of tours all of a sudden, all announced for the spring. So get your calendars ready. A lot of cool stuff. And
Ad Infinitum also
I saw that as well.
Announced shows as a headliner.
Yeah, which is great. That's going to be on the heels of their 70,000 Tons performance. And then they're going to do, I think, about a half dozen shows throughout the U.S. So I hope those are well attended for them. Obviously, wish them the best of luck.
Yeah, I forgot who they had. Some good support too. Just pulling it up.
Seven Spires, I believe.
Yep, Seven Spires and Tulip are both going to be opening. And I think I thought I saw Arcona at one of the, nice. I think one or two of the shows, or just the Chicago show on February 15th. Arcona will be playing as well. And just for a little foreign tour announcement, Glory Hammer is going on tour with Majestica and Arion, which again, it's kind of like one of those, God, I wish that would come to the US, because be another excuse to see Arion and Majestica again. And Glory Hammer always puts on a good show. This is going to be in support of the fifth album, which doesn't exist or have a name yet. It's just called the Fifth Album Release Tour. So I'm guessing we will be getting a new Glory Hammer album next year. But I noticed that Majestica had posted about that, and I was like, I would have gone to that if it was in the United States.
Yeah, I can't argue with that at all. That sounds like a great tour for obvious reasons. that brings us to next week. And next week, I wanted to select something that was another request that we had received from a band that we have not covered, and from a genre which I feel like we haven't really covered that much, at least in recent months. There was a while where we were doing a lot of thrash albums, but we haven't done anything by this band. We've done stuff by the Big Four here in the States, but we have not, and we obviously covered Creator as well, but we haven't covered any of the Canadian thrash. So next week, we're going to go up to Canada, and we're going to talk about the debut album from Annihilator. It's Alice in Hell. It came out April 17th of 1989. And having listened to it a few times already, it is not what I expected at all. I expected something very different. I am a little bit familiar with this band, but I had never heard this album, and I'm glad we're covering it. Again, Charles Florio had requested it. I want to cover it next week. I'm in the mood for some thrash. I think it's some time. So I hope you enjoy this one. I have a feeling you might, because it is a lot less Slayer and a lot more Overkill, and I know that you prefer Overkill to Slayer, so I think you might enjoy this one.
Yep, as Dave Mustaine once said, thrashing all the way during the holidays. So that's where we're headed. So yeah, nice choice, and looking forward. I listened to the album twice now, and I like you felt like it was not what I was expecting in a good way. So I look forward to dissecting it next week.
You want to do dissection next week?
I did not say that.
Well, enjoy the week, my friend. This has been fun. I look forward to finishing up the year strong and getting to our best of 2025 in the very, very near future.
Yeah, I realized that I said that, like, I was surprised that Rebirth wasn't as high as I thought it was. And I think it was because I think in my head always considered it like a 9.5 or like a almost near perfect album. And so like I almost feel like I kind of like set it up for like all that, and it still gets a 9. Like, so I just wanted to add that footnote at the end there, because I just felt like I think you were bracing yourself for me to be like, it's an 8. Yeah, it's a 6.5. Like, what the hell? So yeah, it's just up to that point. With Angra, it's just my expectations were very lofty. So
understood. Enjoy the week, my friend, and we'll come back with some Annihilator next week.
Sounds good. Sorry, I'm yawning. I think I need to go to bed. Have a good one, buddy.
Have a good one.